This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste, alongside me, our Falcons analyst, Jarvis Davis, Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman, and 11 Alive anchor, Maria Martin. The Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So you might want to do a little better of a job of reading the room. We'll talk about exactly what that means. And 97 had something to say, or at least his representative. We'll unpack that in Next Up. And do you really believe QB2 is okay with being QB2? We'll chop that up. And the Falcons got some good grades recently. We'll talk about it. But first, is it really going to happen? I mean, really, Jarvis? The Falcons have been all hands on deck when it comes to adding on the defensive side of the football. Terry Fontenot said all 45 of their interviews at the Combine were with defensive players. Raheem Morris mentioned that their offensive staff isn't even in Indy. All right. Is this finally the year it happens? They take a defensive player in the first round.
You know what, T? To get rid of this condition that I have covering this doggone team for so long, I just say blue. Y'all know what I mean. You know what I'm saying? I just say blue. I ain't gonna say the rest of the term because I don't want everybody to kind of look at me crazy going for the rest of the show. So when I say that though, huh?
I said too late.
Too late, yeah. Too late.
I've been having blues. I've been having the blues because for so long, these past 6-7 years, I have been saying, pounding the table, like literally pounding the table for a defensive lineman / edge rusher, a guy that can put some pressure on his quarterback. And oh my gosh, there's so many guys that I really, really, really like this year. And for them to come out and say, oh, we've only talked to defensive players in this draft, it just makes my heart just get so happy. But you know what? If they do that and then mess around and draft Emeka Egbuka, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't know what I'm gonna do. T. I already told Free, on Locked On Falcons, like, hey man, if they doggone draft the offensive player this draft, I'm taking a shot in their reaction show. I'm drinking on the reaction show, like seriously, because this is ridiculous. But yeah, I want to get rid of the blues. I want to get rid of the blues, T.
And I want you to as well, but you gotta be honest with yourself. That's what I'm here for, to keep you honest, because this could all be smoke and mirrors. I mean, you remember it was a 180 at the very end of 2024. We didn't see Michael Penix Jr. coming until at the very end. 2023, we didn't see Bijan Robinson coming. I think we saw Drake London coming a little bit sooner than
Free saw it coming to you.
Oh, you saw Bijan?
Falcons prophet. Yeah, he saw Bijan.
Okay, Free. I will give you that credit. So we'll say one of saw it coming maybe sooner rather than later. So I don't know, Jarvis. I hate to burst your bubble, but the other side of this could be that it's smoke and mirrors. I mean, do you think it might just, at the end of the day, be a 180 at the very end of the process?
I don't think so, because they seem to be in sync, because Roberts is saying the same thing. Everybody in a mama, grandmama, blind mama can see that this team needs pass rush. They need it, and they've been awful at it. And Raheem Morris has said it. He's all but said everything that I just mentioned and how I described it. So I feel like this would be a dumb attempt at smoke and mirrors if they were doing this, right? So I feel like, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm gonna go out. I know I'm going out on a limb because they can falcon at any time. They can be falcony at any time. I feel like this whole draft is going to be defensive players. I would not be surprised if this whole entire draft is defensive players, and any guys they want to add on the offensive side of the football, they kind of address that in free agency.
Yeah. Now, think about this, Maria. You got to give them somewhat credit because 2024 was decidedly defensive. So, yeah, Jarvis, we can give you that. That's probably a likelihood with the picks after the first round. But what we're saying is, Maria, do you feel like what we saw this week, Terry saying all 45 interviews were on the defensive side, Raheem saying offensive staff, no-go in Indy. You believe this is finally the year that it happens?
I mean, I do in the first round. Do I think that they're going to pick all defensive players? Probably not. And I also think that anything is possible. You know, if you've paid attention to the NFL your whole life, you know that guys like to lie to your face. And I think it's okay, too, because they're protecting their franchise, they're protecting their organization, all that stuff is fine, whatever. However, I do believe there is more pressure on Raw defensively. You know, he is, as a lot of people call him, one of the best defensive minds in the league, one of the best young defensive minds. Well, in order to go out there and prove it, you kind of got to get some chess pieces that'll help you do that. And the only way to do that is to invest through the draft at this point, getting guys in there, as we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast, that can give you a long career, you hope, and also an immediate impact, and cheaply, and do that through the draft. I mean, that is what it's there for. The Falcons have not had a lot of success in doing that with defensive players, obviously, as we all are very well aware of. We've been sitting here talking about them being near the bottom in many very key statistical categories when it comes to the defense. But yes, I do believe that they will draft someone defensively in the first round. And honestly, this draft kind of forces you to do that. I hate to use the word ridiculous if you don't, but it's true. Like, look at all of the guys that are in this draft, even in the position that they're drafting, even if they moved back in order to get some more draft capital, you can get an immediate impact guy in this draft. That's how many good defensive players there are in this draft. And so it's like, the writing's on the wall. It's all there for you. Please take a defensive player. Now, what I think people don't need to get mixed up in is, because there's only defensive coaches at the combine, and because they've only had meetings with defensive players at the combine specifically, the combine isn't the end all be all, as we all know, when it comes to the draft. There are other ways to look at players. They will have offensive coaches at a plethora of pro days across the country leading up to the draft. Then you have the East-West Shrine Bowl, you have the Senior Bowl, you have a lot of different avenues to study offensive players as well. Do I think they're going to do a U-turn and pick something like a quarterback like they did last year? No, I don't. But again, you know, it's kind of like when you're dating someone when you're younger and they continue to show you something and you still believe them after they've showed you everything you didn't want to see, as in Terry Fontenot only drafting offensive players. You're like, okay, I don't believe you until you can do the opposite of that. I think finally we got on the right track.
Experience.
I think everyone has that experience, right? Yeah, 100%.
On this show, but
you're like
I
17.
immediately acknowledged red flags as a young age.
Well, you probably don't have that experience because you're a male, so that's why you don't have that experience.
That's why I said the girls on the show would say otherwise. Okay,
thank you. I will call it as it is.
Yes, I appreciate that, Maria. Thank you for checking.
You're welcome. But anyway, I do feel like, long story short, and into the dating pool, this is the year that Terry Fontenot drafts a defensive player in the first round.
I'm tired of being blue, baby. Let's go.
Okay. Well, I was trying to avoid that. But here we are.
Yeah. We don't want to get Jarvis.
There's so many jokes going on in my head right now that I would not say.
In order to make this a happy, keep it a happy place, because Maria said she's going to stick in the positive lane. So we're going to stay in the positive lane as well. And we're going to say that finally, the defensive player at the altar is not going to be jilted when it comes to Terry Fontenot. He's not going to run away for the offensive player that looks like the shiny toy. Probably isn't a good analogy right here. But I would say this sounds like a show that's at least trying to be optimistic, but not just by what we've seen for the combine. It's almost like what Maria said, if I can piggyback on that, the rest of the league is going to copycat. They're all looking for their next version of the Philadelphia Eagles. So if you're a team that was supposed to at least represent your division in the postseason last year and you didn't even make it to the postseason, how can you not replicate what the Super Bowl champions did and replicate it by starting in the first round to do it?
Well, it's funny that you put it that way because I remember we had this exact same conversation the last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl back in 2017, and everybody was like, "Oh, the Falcons have to draft a pass rusher. They need D tackle help," and so a lot of people were expecting them to go D tackle round one, and then Calvin Ridley fell to them, and they took Calvin Ridley, and they went pretty heavy offense in that draft. And so it is not unknown for the Atlanta Falcons to zig while you expect them to zag, but I do think it is February still. We got like 2 more days of February. So it's all positive vibes at this stage because nothing has happened this all season, and to disappoint us or to make us, like the Falcons again. But I do feel like, yes, 100% no possibility of the Falcons doing something differently. They will take a defensive player in the first round as a way to rebuild this defense. I feel like
100%. You're so sure.
I like it.
It's February, Marie. I can say out of pocket things.
Yeah, that was in February.
Yeah.
If I can say I want to stop having the blues, he can say 100% that Falcons going to draft the defensive player.
Yeah, he should be in his happy place.
Right,
You go ahead.
yes. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yes, connect those two statements, Jarvis. Please, I really appreciate it.
You got to come with me, dog. Come on, man.
Sips tea and drinks water.
But yeah, I do feel like it is definitely leaning in that direction. I think it's been leaning in that direction since last year. We were all shocked when they took Michael Penix, but I think they felt like, okay, this is like the final piece on our offensive side of the ball after adding Kirk Cousins, and we have the receivers, we have the running backs, we have the tight end, we have the offensive line, and then we can just kind of devote, as we saw, a lot of the remaining resources in last year's draft to the defense, and that project I think is going to continue into this year with the bulk, if not potentially all of their draft picks this year being devoted to that side of the ball too.
Yeah, I think so. So you don't think that there's a possibility, or you don't think the likelihood, because there's always a possibility. So I'll switch it to likelihood that this is a smoke and mirror situation where, hey, we're diverting attention and we're looking at all these guys. We're looking at them, but we're really thinking about where they're going to land, possibly in the second round, or, trading up for them or trading back, like not necessarily that first round. You're sure that this won't be a smoke and mirror situation.
Yes, I am sure, just because normally this time of year, I'm like, well, they could go spend a lot of money in free agency fixing their defense, and then that will open up their opportunities to go in different directions in the draft. But this year, I don't think the Falcons are going to spend a ton of money in free agency. So it doesn't feel like I think they'll spend some money, but it doesn't feel like they're going to be able to. And because this team has so many needs on the defensive side of the ball, it's not, to me, realistic that they're going to be able to, even if they do go out there and sign a couple of guys, solve all those problems. That there's still going to be some glaring holes on this defense when we go into April. And I've heard Terry Fontenot speak a lot this week. I've only heard him use best player available once. And normally, putting multiple microphones in front of Terry Fontenot, the counter on best player available would be like 83 or something like that at this stage in the week. And so the fact that he's only doing it once kind of is hinting that I think, so to answer your question, T, I feel like very, 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 very strong likelihood, if not definite possibility, that they'll get there.
So in other words, Jarvis, Maria, what Terry Fontenot was saying was he's going to use our new term, BTPA. He just hasn't kind of gotten comfortable with best trench player available, but that's really what he meant. In that one time that he mentioned BPA, he meant BTPA. So, okay, Terry, we're with you on that. Real quick though, guys, just another curveball to you guys. We know that when we look at the order, first round, 15, second round, 46, any chance that you guys think that they will potentially still go offensive in that first round, but then find their way in with that 46, find their way moving up to get a guy, because they're like, well, it's really a deep draft for defensive players.
I'm triggered. No, please no.
I don't, because remember last year when they walked into the room after the first round had happened and it looked like, I don't know, it looks like they were talking about a car accident. It was like the most somber, like, what did we just do situation. And not because they weren't excited about Michael Penix Jr. That was not the vibe whatsoever. But what they were trying to explain was they attempted to go back up and get a defensive player, and that didn't work out for them. Now, who's to say that couldn't work this year? Maybe it could, but those are a lot of if, ands, and buts. And everybody knows the way that things operate on draft night and beyond. You're at the discretion of so many other variables. And so I think in order to go back up, I don't think doing something that failed the first time around that you tried to do it, I don't think that would work out, especially in a year where defense is staring you in the face. Like, please take any of these players. They're all serviceable. They're all good.
Yeah, if anything, they might luck out and be able to go back a little bit in the first round and maybe regain some of the draft capital that they've lost. That might be more the likely opportunity that they have this year that maybe they didn't have last year. Well, listen, reading the room is not a skill that everybody has. We'll talk about that when we take it under further review. This episode of our Atlanta football party is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. People who love using FanDuel's live betting feature, they do so because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing a team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, never feel like you missed out on a chance. And the app is easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Maria, Terry Fontenot said, quote, Drew is a UFA, of course, referring to Drew Dalman. So we know he's a really good player. He's been a big part of our offensive line for a long time. But like Drew or any other unrestricted agent, we have to have those conversations in time. Does that sound like an endorsement to you of Drew Dalman returning, or more positioning for if he doesn't?
What's funny is Terry has incredibly mastered the art of saying so many things without saying anything at all. Yeah. It's honestly astonishing. And I want to commend him for that. I need to get better at that maybe, because I'm kind of an open book. And this guy has mastered saying absolutely nothing, but you're like, wait, did he say something? He said nothing there. And I think the only thing that really indicated that perhaps Drew is going to be around in the future is there's this, lackadaisical, it's all good, we'll talk to his agent whenever. He doesn't really say that with people unless there's a definitive, we want them out of the building. There's not a, we'll see if he's here in the future. So that's the only thing that really kind of gives me an indication that Drew will be here. And I do think he will be here. I just don't think that it's easy to disseminate what Terry says from something like that.
Yeah, I think the same. Aaron, it is, you know how we say coach speak? This isn't even GM speak. This is Terry speak.
It's incredible.
It really is. Mastery of it is almost like an understatement, because it's Drew is a UFA. We know that. We know he's a really good player. We know that. He's been a big part of our O-line for a long time. Check. Like Drew or any other unrestricted agent, we have to have those conversations in time. No ish, Sherlock. But does that sound like an endorsement to you of Drew Dalman returning, or maybe more positioning in the middle so that Terry doesn't look like he was leaning towards a Drew return, but then he doesn't look like he wasn't leaning towards a Drew return?
Yeah, I think Maria's got it right. Terry will say a lot and say nothing. And so you have to kind of grade what he says on a curve, because it's that middle spot is he's gonna stay in the middle. So you have to see you got to figure out which side of the middle is he leaning, and you just got to read the little subtle cues. And I do think, like Maria said, the little subtle cues of how you sort of listen to Terry Fontenot does lean towards Drew Dalman returning, but he absolutely will not necessarily. he's just out here like sticking and moving. Like you'll never be able to take a soundbite of mine and throw it back in my face ever again. So it's one of those things where like he does a great job of that. But because you understand how he operates and how he speaks and whatnot, it does at least make me feel a little bit more optimistic that we are on the path to Drew Dalman returning. But yeah, Terry's, he's never going to, like, the time he'll say, "Oh, we love Drew," is the day after they sign him, right? That's the only time. But like before that, like he's just gonna be like, "Yeah, we like him, and we'll see." And it's just like, okay, man, like
we got to talk to him. Oh, you do? I had no idea.
Imagine that concept.
Yeah. So I think he'll be back, but we'll see.
Sometimes middle of the road reasoning and stating is also why you're middling. I mean, that happens sometimes as well. But that said, Jarvis, did you get anything whatsoever out of what Terry Fontenot said about Drew Dalman? Like any tea leaves?
You know what? I don't know if I'm necessarily on the bandwagon of he's going to be back with his team, meaning Drew Dalman, right? Okay. Because I feel like general managers have to have a backup plan. I think their break-in case emergency plan is definitely Ryan Newsom. I would, you know what, if you telling me that Ryan Newsom is going to be signed for a 2-year, $15 million deal, and he's going to be the starter, coming into this season, I wouldn't be shocked, right? But the one thing that kind of makes me hold true to him having a good chance of coming back, though, it has to be that I drafted the guy, meaning Terry Fontenot. I drafted this guy in the 4th round, and we developed this guy into a starter, a legitimate starter for our offensive line. And I think that has to be a feather in his cap that he wants to keep, right? Because that's the whole point of this thing. Finding guys with good value, getting those good years out of them, and then paying them, because you want everybody to see that, right? Okay, if I come in as a mid-round pick for the Falcons, I got an opportunity to get that second contract, because that's what it's all about, right? So that's the only thing that kind of makes me think that Drew is going to come back, because I feel like Terry's saying, okay, I drafted this guy, I brought him in because I can't take credit for Chris Lindstrom or Caleb McGarry. So this is one of my guys. And, Matthew Bergeron, hopefully he can be one of those guys as well. So I want to start this trend of bringing in guys that are legitimate starters once we get them into our program.
Yeah, and I will sound just a little bit, and it's not being negative, it's just kind of keeping it real. Terry's fighting for his life this year. He's fighting for his GM life. And one of the things that helps you to fight for your GM life is to be able to have as many players as possible that are on the successful side of the pendulum when it comes to you stating your case for why you should be retained as a GM. So Terry Fontenot has started really stating his case from the day he did the end of season press conference, and he will continue to do that. And I think in large part, that's probably a big reason why he keeps him, because that's a part of his ability to say, hey, look at my portfolio beyond a Michael Penix Jr., because that's a first rounder. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, those are your first rounders. But that guy, somebody you can point to and say, hey, it's not just the first rounders, these 3 or 4 that I've hit on, but look at what I was able to do with someone deeper in the rounds. I just think he's looking over his shoulders, knowing that it's the full body of work that's going to keep him in that job, of course, coupled with what the Falcons do next season. But that's really where it is. And then Raheem Morris spoke on someone we've spoken about many times on this show, Kyle Pitts. He's shown some spurts of greatness, and he showed some things that desire more, and will find a way to get the best out of him at all times. A little bit of coach speak, just not as much Terry speak there from Raheem on Kyle Pitts. So for you, Maria, does that sound like the Falcons are planning to move forward with KP as their tight end in 2025? And let me throw this one at you. Or does it give an indication that even if he's still with the team, they're not necessarily saying that he's going to be the starting tight end, especially after what we saw in the uptick in play from Charlie Warner last season?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back a little bit on what I said about Terry earlier, which I still believe that he is the master in terms of saying everything without saying anything at all. But he did have words about Kyle Pitts. Now, I know you just talked about Raheem Morris and his comments, and they were very directed towards Kyle, and that he does leave some things that are left to be desired. And, challenging Kyle in a way because they did pick up his 5th-year option last year. And so he is going to be on the roster and set to become a free agent after that. And so, so long as you don't deal him out and get a player in return in free agency, he's going to be on the roster. And so they're saying, hey, Kyle, we need more from you. We need to see more from you. People around the league need to see more from you. Terry also said the same thing, that Kyle's a very good player, but that they need to see more from him. And, you know, all of these things. And he's probably one of the few players that they had direct comments about other than Kirk Cousins, but that's another conversation, which they still say everything without saying anything about Kirk. Anyways, Kyle, as we've all talked about many times on this podcast, does leave a lot to be desired. And there were comments about the fact that maybe Michael Penix Jr. is the answer now for him, and that he really believes in Kyle, and that maybe he can bring out the best version of him. And so some of these comments make me feel like Kyle might be here next year. And a lot of us believed that it's a possibility he's not. And I think I even said maybe at the end of the season, I didn't believe that Kyle would be here because that's an easy player to deal out. And he does still have a lot of room to grow and to show you what he's capable of. I don't know that that's ever going to happen here in Atlanta. But what Terry and Raheem both are saying is, we want to see the best from you so long as you're on our roster, which who doesn't out of any player that's on their roster. However, it does make me feel like maybe they're seeing something different in Kyle that I haven't seen, that you guys haven't seen. I'm not sure. And those are conversations obviously that they've had in the offseason. Maybe it's Kyle saying, this is finally a quarterback that I feel good with. I don't know. But what I do believe is that there's more of a possibility now than before that Kyle will be here next year.
I've always been on the stance that there's like a 60% chance that they'll trade Kyle Pitts this offseason. I don't think Raheem or Terry's statements change the math for me. I think it ultimately just boils down to whether another team gives them an offer that they basically say we can't refuse. And I think there's a 60% chance of that happening, but there's a 40% chance that teams are like, yeah, we'll wait and see if you guys can get more out of Kyle Pitts, and then we'll figure it out ourselves. So I do feel like, when it comes to Kyle Pitts, his future is certainly in doubt. There's a good chance he could be here. There's a good chance he'd be gone. I think we'll just have to wait and see. And I don't think these comments really are a strong endorsement of Kyle Pitts. They're just kind of like, we'll see what we can do. That's kind of how it is.
And when you want to know if someone believes you or not, follow the money. What does the money look, right? They picked up the 5th-year option. So there's some belief there, right? We know they want to see him succeed. Obviously, Terry Fontenot basically seemed like a theme of this show. I brought this guy in. I made him the highest draft tight end in NFL history, in the NFL draft era, right? In the common draft era. And so, I want him to come out here and get 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. Yeah. If you like Mike, hey, you go establish that relationship with Mike. And Mike is already starting to do that, right? He's having conversations with Kyle, and Raheem Morris even talked about how that's the next step for Mike, getting the guys together. And Mike said, I want to come to you and work out with you where you are. And I think those are some of the things that I feel like they really have such a belief in Michael Penix's ability to be able to get the ball to everyone they want to get the ball to in this offense. I feel like that is what going to justify them picking up his 5th-year option, because if they didn't believe in him, they could have done the same thing they did with Caleb McGarry. Caleb McGarry, we ain't picking up your 5th-year option, boy. Boy, I ain't mean to call him man boy like that. Sorry about that, Caleb. My apologies. But we're not picking up your 5th-year option, and you're going to have to prove it on the field. They could have easily done that, but they didn't. So they pick up the 5th-year option. So there is belief there. But I just feel like the Falcons are just so asset strapped, in this offseason. I feel like I was just like Aaron. I'm like, hey, Kyle Pitts, you can probably get some value there. You can get a mid-round pick maybe, for him, Yeah. So it's kind of like, if you get that phone call, you're going to pick up the phone for sure.
But I don't know if they'll get that phone call, because at the end of the day, it may not be dictated by what Terry or Raheem want. Honestly, it's also a rich tight end class, the 2025 draft. So that may ultimately dictate that his worth on the market is limited. And at the end of the day, they have to make it work with Kyle Pitts. 97 had something to say, or at least his representative. Will unpack that in Next Up. So Aaron, Grady Jarrett's agent, Todd France, said, quote, Grady is an Atlanta Falcon right now. So we'll see where this goes. I'm sure I'll be with Atlanta while I'm here, obviously in Indy, and we'll talk about the future. So does this sound like an agent whose client will be back next season?
I mean, it is not necessarily being like, oh, we definitely believe that Grady Jarrett is going to be an Atlanta Falcon forever and he's going to retire in Atlanta. Like, those are the words that you want to hear, but like, that's not the words he's obviously saying. So if it's based off of that, like, it doesn't sound particularly optimistic, but at the same time, like, there hasn't really been any statement that makes you think that Grady's release is imminent, right? I think everybody looks at Grady Jarrett's $20 million cap hit, and they say, Grady, that's you're getting paid what you've been to the organization, not what you are to the organization or what you will be. And so I think everybody looks at that number and says, or at least certainly the Falcons, I'm sure Todd France's agent loves that number at its current price since he gets 3%. But everybody else looks at that number and says that number has to come down. And I think Todd France, Grady's agent, is like, I understand that's the circumstances, and we got to figure out a number that makes sense for both Grady and the Atlanta Falcons, and that requires negotiation. And so I think that's really what this statement is about. Like, they haven't figured that out yet. They'll probably, hopefully, figure that out this week or in the next couple of days and weeks in the lead up to that March 12th start of the league year. So I think that's really what they're talking about, is like, they all have to come together and figure out a number that works for both parties.
Yeah, that's kind of what I got out of that as well. I'm starting to lean in the direction, Maria, that they will find a way to retain Grady Jarrett. He, like Free said, he means so much to the organization. You have a very young defense, and it would help to have that veteran. And I do think there are ways. I mean, Terry Fontenot comes from the organization that may be the most creative ever in restructuring contracts in the New Orleans Saints. So there may be a possibility or an opportunity for a restructure there that would make it cap friendly, make it Falcons friendly, and make it friendly enough to keep Grady. But for you, when you hear those comments from Todd France, and all things considered, does it sound like an agent whose client will be back next season for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with Aaron here. I feel like this is, just indicating that Grady will be here, but things have to be moved around and things have to be figured out. However, it also indicates that Grady Jarrett is not untouchable with this franchise. And if anything, and if Falcons fans want to be nervous about something, it has been proven the last couple of years that essentially no player is untouchable. We saw the breakup with Matt Ryan, and we saw what I believe is inevitable with Kirk Cousins and that whole debacle. And just the loyalty in the NFL is not there anymore. It's hard when you're getting paid so much money and there's so many dollars being thrown around. Which I know is probably unfortunate for a lot of people, specifically Grady, to hear, because Grady means so much to this organization. You guys said, he's been a cornerstone and a pillar of this organization for a very long time. I mean, who would have thought that a guy that was picked when he did would work out the way that he has? And Grady's a phenomenal story. He's done so much for the city of Atlanta and the surrounding areas. And, this is home to Grady, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to ride off into the sunset and hold hands and have a great story at the end of the day. However, I do believe Grady's going to be here. At least I hope he is. But the Falcons have planned for his future. We saw that last year's draft. We know that he cannot play football forever. Nobody can. And somebody's going to have to come in after him, and they have to plan for his departure. He's getting older. He has been older. He had his first serious injury of his entire career, and has been on the way back from that. This is a different time with Grady. And I think that number that Aaron is talking about, the 20 million, is going to come down significantly. It's just up to Todd and everyone else with the Falcons to try to figure out what that might look like.
And so, Jarvis, we had a little agent speak there from Todd France on Grady Jarrett, but do you think that it was an indication one way or the other about whether or not his client, Grady Jarrett, will be back next season?
I feel like Todd is going to put the ball in the Falcons' court, because just for all those reasons you all just laid out, Maria and Free, just because like what he's done for this organization, he's been a pillar. Raheem Morris even went as far as said, man, you can't put a value on what he brings to this organization, right? So, so what does that look like as you getting ready to turn 32 years old in April, right? So if you're going to be in a space where you hit the reset button for this defense, because if they were to cut, and I think everybody can agree that David Onyemata is pretty much out of here, right? They're going to save those $8 million against the cap in 2025 and release him. But if you cut Grady, that means you're hitting the reset button.
Yes.
Yeah,
on up front, right? Because he is the only guy that you can count on from a production standpoint up front on that defensive line for the past 8-9 years, right? So I feel you want to be able to bring more guys on that in order to play at the level, because you say you want to get into the playoffs. So if you want to get into the playoffs, you got to keep some vet around here that you know what you're going to get from him, because you're going to have to get younger with the that we laid out with these draft picks that you have this year and the guys that you brought in last year. Those guys are going to have to have an IID too, immediate impact on defense in 2025. So I feel like I don't know if Fontenot is ready to go that route just from a perception standpoint. We know they got to get there at some point from a football standpoint, but I don't know if from a perception standpoint they're ready to go that route. So that's why I feel like Todd is like, I'm not going to go either way, but the ball is in you all's court to make a decision on that.
Can I say one very quick thing? You bring up a really good point, Jarvis, about perception, because as Tenitra mentioned a lot earlier in this show, this is such a make or break year for Terry Fontenot, and a player like Grady Jarrett can easily break the trajectory of the future of your contribution to this organization as a general manager. And that is such a risk. And we talk about high risk, high reward. That's been a theme on this podcast throughout the last couple of months, especially when it comes to Kirk Cousins. But if you're going to do that with Grady, you better hope that there is some kind of payback on the football field, or else
Rook better be an all-pro. You hear me?
For real.
He better be an all-pro this year.
Yeah. I mean, nothing else will do. That's the thing. Like, Grady is that interesting, because, and I was thinking the same thing, Maria, but wanted to let you go first, and I'll co-sign on it. So you look at the Matt Ryan debacle, right? And as much as this city was split on him, the reality is nobody wanted to see Matt Ryan go out like that. No. And the Falcons took a big L locally and nationally for the way they managed through the Matt Ryan situation. Fast forward to Kirk Cousins, and all of a sudden the world falls off the edge when they draft Michael Penix Jr., right? And then everybody's waiting to see how,
including Kirk, by the way, fell off the edge as well.
Right. So everybody
he was running from it in Minnesota too.
Right. And so you spend the entirety of the 2024 offseason waiting to see how this is going to play out, and then all the way on the other side of their break, the bye, to see, okay, now it's Michael Penix Jr. Debacle, because that didn't stop the conversation. It only actually added fuel to the fire. And think about it. We're still talking about this darn situation and how it's going to play out, and it's damn near March. So I think you guys are absolutely right. Sometimes it is not about what's on the field completely. Sometimes you just can't take another L, because as much as this franchise, this organization got high marks for what it does and what it's done to improve facilities for players, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The bottom line is they're still looking around saying, oh yeah, but who's at this locker? Who's at that locker? And are these guys at this locker, that locker, and across there, are they winners? Are they guys who have a proven track record to win? Can they be a part of what shows me how to be a part of a winning culture? And Grady Jarrett is one of the few holdovers like Jake Matthews who can say, wait a minute, yeah, I can tell you a little bit about a winning culture because I've gone to a Super Bowl. right? So there are some positives about him that go way beyond the stat line. And one of them is the optics of, do you really want that smoke for about the third time in 4 years? And I just don't know if they want that smoke. I think there's a way to get around it. And I think the franchise and Todd France will figure it out. So speaking of that, I just said it. Damn it, we're still talking about Kirk Cousins. So that's what we're going to talk about on the other side. This episode of our Atlanta football party is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no place to get in on it better than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. If you love using FanDuel's live betting feature, it's probably because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, because you're looking at your team maybe coming back for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, and that helps you to feel like you never really missed anything. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Jarvis, I know that you are just so excited and couldn't wait for us to get back so you can kick off our conversation about Kirk Cousins. Terry Fontenot said, quote, "We're moving forward with Kirk Cousins as a backup QB. Kirk handled that really well at the end of the season," meaning last season. Obviously, Kirk's a really talented player. He's a great man, all those things. Again, he handled that role well at the end of the season. But do you believe, Terry, to the point where you believe Kirk Cole will actually be QB2 come summer?
Hell no. Ain't nowhere in the world that's gonna be on this roster. Sorry. Y'all can think about that all you want. And I know a lot of Falcon fans out there like, yeah, for what he said and hiding his injuries, he's gonna be backup quarterback. No, man, that ain't real life, Jack. That ain't happening. It ain't happening. Yes. I don't know if your name Jack or not, but some Jacks out there.
Jack today.
I'm talking
Jack's
to you.
like, what the heck?
Right. What I do.
you, all y'all, 24-hour lockdown. Sorry, my bad, Tom. But yeah, it's there's no way he's on this roster in the summertime, because here's the thing. Terry Fontenot has to say that. He has to say, because that's the only bargaining chip that he really has. Because if he's on this roster, that means $10 million gets guaranteed on the 5th day of the new league year, right? In 2026. So for him, it's just like, man, we already in the hole, baby. What's $10 more million? So yeah, we willing to go that route if you don't want to play ball, Kirk. So yeah, this is what he has to say, and I don't blame him, because I feel like Terry wants to make this right, and I feel like he can make this right by, get some compensation for him.
That's fair. That is fair. And yeah, Aaron, Terry Fontenot is kind of in a holding pattern here, right? This has been the consistent feedback or the consistent statement that Terry has had, because really that's kind of all they have. Kirk Cousins has had a different stance. It seems like every few weeks we get a different nugget. We get a different nugget in the chess game. But I feel like with Terry Fontenot, he's pretty much stayed there because, well, that's really the only place you can stay. But the reality is, do you really think Kirk Cousins is going to be out here taking reps with the second team in the summertime?
No, I won't go as strong as Jarvis said, but yeah, there's no chances it happens.
So you're not calling
Jack.
I'm going to
call out Jack? Dang it.
Jack, you're safe.
Yes. Chill out, Jack. But like, it would be tremendous content, for all of us here talking about it. If we're sitting here in May and OTAs and Maria's, going up and like, hey, Kirk, how does it feel taking reps with the twos? Like, it'll be great for, the shows and whatnot. But
what do you want to say to Jack?
The Falcons,
you got anything to say to Jack?
Like, the Falcons don't. They don't want no part of that. So it's been interesting this week because I've seen Terry talk to various entities. I've seen Raheem talk to NBC Sports and CBS Sports, and they always say if statements when it comes to Kirk Cousins, right?
Yeah.
Like it's if, because they're of the
I know.
mindset that Kirk Cousins is not going to be here. Now, the question is whether or not Kirk Cousins is going to leave via cut or leave via trade. Obviously, the Falcons would like it to be via trade, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to cut. And again, as Jarvis said, the Falcons have to basically, as a part of any team that's going to call about Kirk Cousins to take him on trade, they have to make because if those teams are like, well, you're just going to cut him, why are we going to trade for him if we can get him at $1 million as opposed to $27.5 million?
Right.
So the Falcons have to say, oh, we fully intend on Kirk Cousins being here beyond March 17th, so that you have to, if you want him, you have to trade with us. So that's what Jarvis is talking about, where Terry and Raheem have to say, oh, yes, Kirk Cousins is definitely going. We are very comfortable with Kirk Cousins being the backup quarterback. But they always sort of, when you really listen to them, they're always saying, like, if that comes to, because when people ask, like, are you really going to have Kirk and taking backup reps? And they're like, well, we'll see what happens if that happens, all that stuff. So, like, they know Kirk's not going to be here this summer. It's just a question of how does he depart from Atlanta. That's basically what's really up at stake at this point in time.
Indeed. And so, Jarvis, we were talking about this when we're talking about Grady and the potential for another debacle, right? Because that also, I think, means something to free agents. Obviously, it does, because we'll talk about how people rated different franchises or players rated different franchises coming up. But it's one of those as well where you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, is there a way for the Falcons to still come out of this with Terry feeling like, hey, we made the right move, or getting out of this debacle by resetting the table? Like, what does that look like? Aaron obviously said the right for the franchise would be by trading him, but kind of what do all those pieces entail? Because I believe that when you're looking at how the Falcons manage this situation, I think free agents are looking at how they manage it as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm gonna speak from Raheem Morris' standpoint, but because I feel like Terry wants to do this thing via trade. If any assets I can get back to have something to work with, to get some younger guys in here, I'm gonna try to give it. So I think he wants to get that trade. I'm at the point now that I feel like Rod's tired of talking about Kirk, right? Because the way he said that Michael Penix is our quarterback, it was some unkind. He said, I was like, yeah, of course he is. Like, the fact that he has to say that here in February, like you said, T, going into March almost in a couple of days, I think that Rod wants to move past it so I don't have to answer questions about that. And I feel like the path to that, the quickest, is to go ahead and cut that man. Cut your losses. Whatever perception, I'll take the hit. Like, I'm happy to have Mike. Any question about Kirk? I'm happy to have Mike. We're moving forward with Mike. He can really get into some raw speak, right? He's like, I'm so happy to work with Mike and him being our quarterback of the future. I'm just so excited about what he's going to do for us in 2025 when we're going into the playoffs. So, yeah, I feel like Raw is the guy that saying, hey, man, cut this dude so we can get the hell on. Jack.
It's Jack again.
Yes, Jack catching it today. He getting all the smoke today.
We're so sorry, Jack. We didn't mean to bring you into this mess. We really didn't. We really didn't. But yeah, I think you make a great point. We've been kind of focusing a lot on Terry Fontenot and kind of his perspective for this. But yeah, if you're Raheem Morris, you do want this story to go away, because this is still a part of a dark cloud that is over your head, because people say, well, who was the one who really wanted to pull the trigger for Michael Penix Jr.? Was it Terry? Was it Raheem? Who was the one who pushed for Kirk Cousins? Was it Terry? Was it Raheem? So I don't blame him. If it's me, I also want to have that narrative put to bed, because as long as that narrative is out there, it keeps taking everybody back to the debacle that 2024 was overall. And yeah, if I'm a coach and it's my second year and I feel like I might be fighting for my head coaching life as well, I do want all the emphasis to be focused on what I am about to do versus what I did. So yeah, I think you're right that although this is more of a Terry story or a Terry situation, Raheem's about had it too. I think he's about ready to move on as well and just be about his true QB1 and what the rest of the new look 2025 Falcons are going to be.
Absolutely.
So when we come back, there are some positives coming out of Flowery Branch, and it came exactly from the players who spoke and Arthur Blank listened. We'll talk about that when we come back. Maria, the players spoke, the Falcons listened. The NFLPA report card came out this week, and the Falcons did really, really well. They improved their overall grade from 25th to 3rd in the league in voting by the players. Quote, the Atlanta Falcons saw the biggest improvement in their player assessments of the club throughout the report card survey, thanks to major facility upgrades that occurred this past offseason, including a revamped weight room, locker room, and dining area. So what does this say about the organization? We'll look at it as a whole, and then I got another question for you on this survey, but looking at it from a whole, what does it say about this type of jump and what the players feel about the franchise?
Well, Arthur Blank is the kind of owner where if his players speak up and rate him very poorly or rate the organization very poorly, he's going to do everything in his power, in his pocket, to make sure that that is reversed and very quickly. And that's exactly what we saw. It's amazing whenever you have somebody that is very proactive about results in terms of a facility and all of those things. The team is another aspect, but the facility, I mean, I've been there. I'm there all the time throughout the year. It is unbelievable. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And even some of the players that I have been close with that have come into the Falcons during my time here in Atlanta, I'm like, how does this compare around the league? I'm really good friends with someone who joined the team this past year, and him and I have known each other forever. And I was like, this is like the most ridiculous locker room ever, isn't it? He said, no, this is the best one I've been in. And he's been on 4 different teams. So I think that speaks volumes. And the players obviously said thank you for listening to us, because this is night and day. And we're at the point now where the Falcons, it's like, look good, feel good. We hope that means play good, ? You know, the weight room is great. Everything looks so much better. So I think that's, you know, it's a step in the right direction. There's nothing else to say about the fact that good for Arthur Blank for listening and spending the money to get them what they need.
That's what I felt like as well. It's a starting point, right? It's a selling point when you're trying to get free agents in here, and when they're able to say, man, so that next free agent who comes in, and like Maria said, to her point, her friend is saying, wow, this is the best of what I've seen. It is a selling point. It's a selling point.
Yeah. You know, last year when they got some of those low grades coming off the season that they were coming on, it was just like kind of twisting the knife a little deeper, a little bit. And this year, because, you know, the season didn't quite live up to expectations, like the good grades this year are not like, you know, it's like, oh man, it's great. But it's at the same time, it's just like, but like, you know, can you win some games? You know, like, it's like, yeah, like I'm glad all the players are enjoying their time in the locker room. I'm glad the players' relationships with management and the coaches is much better. So, you know, happy players, you know, hopefully, as you say, you know, you'll start seeing those on-field results. So I think, you know, if you look at it from a process standpoint, this is a great place for the Falcons to be, especially given some of the low grades that they got in several of these areas. This has always been a selling point of Arthur Blank since he's gotten here, which is like, we're a world-class organization. We'll treat you right. That was a big selling point back in the day when like they would bring in free agents, and it was like Arthur Blank would take them out to dinner, and he would wine and dine them, and they would always land their guy.
You name it.
Yeah. So it's
great.
Yeah, you know, so it's one of those. It's all part of the Arthur Blank experience. So I'm glad it's being reflected in this NFLPA report card. But you know, at the same time, you're just like, you know, can you make the playoffs? Like, you know, that's what we care about watching the team. But for the players, this is the stuff that matters. You know,
they've got freaking bucket seats in the locker room, and they've got like, you open up the top of their locker, and there's a little device where they stick their helmet and their gloves and everything on, and it dries it for you. So you're wet and sweaty out there in the summertime in Atlanta, and then you stick. It's unbelievable, but it's also unbelievable that they can't make the playoffs with the drying machine in their locker. So, you know, it's catch-22.
Right. And that was my question as well, Jarvis. So I'm just going to throw it out there since Free kind of started it, and Maria kind of twisted it a little bit, twisted that knife a little bit. Dang it. We love everything about it. It's like looking for a new house, right? Like, I hate where I live. So I'm like obsessed with like looking at new houses, because I'm like, I can't wait to be a homeowner again, right? But the new house can look as great as I want it to. If I walk in and everything's not working, it's like a moot point, right? I feel like, well, why the heck did I buy this house? I think it's kind of the same thing. Like, yeah, all of that is great, but I'm going to need you to get some players on the inside of said house and win. And Jarvis, I think as much as we like that, it's impressive. The jump from 25 to third is impressive, but it's still not like give me the players, give me the wins.
Yeah. So yeah, happy employees, more victories, I guess. I don't know.
Wait, that was so good.
Thank you, man. I thought of myself.
Jack would be so proud.
But yeah, it's like everybody has perfectly laid out. It's all about getting these wins, man. Like, can we get some wins? Like, that's what we want to see. And I think that's why I feel like overall, this is such a critical year, critical offseason for Terry Fontenot, because he has to get it done. You need linebackers, get it done, man. You need another safety, get it done, man. You need to figure out who you're gonna cut, get it done, man. Whatever you got to do that you think is going to get your team into the postseason for the first time in 7 years, or that's what you got to do, and you got to make sure, and you have to make the right decision, because it's gonna no excuses. None whatsoever, because if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to look at you first. I know a lot of people want to throw Raheem Morris in there too, but, like, hey, man, you got a dude that have been making the decisions, ain't had to win this record since he's been here as a general manager. So, hey, it's his fault,
Well, interesting that you mentioned that, Jarvis, because when you look at the report card overall, there's nothing in the report card that speaks of the front office. So we can't necessarily say how the players feel about the front office moves, but we can say, or you know what, I'll let you guys say it and see if you think the same way. The report card does allow the players to rate the owner as well as rate the head coach. So they did give Arthur Blank an A+, but what I thought was impressive and a vote of confidence to Raheem Morris was they gave him an A+ as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said this. Even when going back to when Raheem Morris was here the first time around, and he was on the offensive side of the football, I like what this dude is able to do from a communicator standpoint, because that was Arthur Smith's downfall. I think we can all say that, agree to that. The dude just didn't know how to communicate with his players, and obviously the media from time to time as well. So when you bring a guy that's the antithesis of that, right? Like, of course, yes, absolutely. That's going to be like, yes, of course we like Rob, because he knows how to talk to me. He can get on my level. He can talk to me from my position and what I'm doing, what I'm contributing to this team. So I've always liked that about Raw, and that hasn't changed, right? So I think it's just all about, at the end of the day, you just got to come down to the results. That has to transfer. Like, the only way you can have a good culture if you're winning football games. He has the traits to create a good culture, but at the end of the day, to get that full 100% buy-in from that locker room, you got to put some wins on the field. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, Jarvis is right. It's not shocking to me that the players have voted both Arthur Blank and Raw in the tops in the league. That's not a surprise. They've always really, really liked Arthur Blank as an owner. He is a very good owner. He's very communicative. He will do right by you if you play here for a long time. Even the Matt Ryan thing, they're still really close, and he's very compassionate as an owner. And with Raw, it's obvious. I mean, he's like one of the best people, whatever you want to call him, in the NFL. He's got that vibe about him. The players adore him, and all of that stuff is wonderful. And I think that is the first step to creating this culture that Jarvis is talking about. And the culture it's a 180 in there. I can tell you that. I mean, but at the end of the day, like, in training camp last year, I was like, this is the best place I've ever been. Like, the vibes were so high. It was so fun. You start losing, though. I don't care who's coaching. I don't care who owns your team. The vibes go like this.
You don't want to hear
it's okay. It's okay to admit that stuff doesn't matter when you're not winning on the football field. So I think that is important. It's such an important piece to building a good culture in the NFL. However, if the wins don't come, none of this stuff even matters.
Yeah, Maria's right? Because all the buzz during the summer last year. The vibes are great. You know, the week one didn't go according to plan, and the vibes were a little off after that. But then after that, they turned it around. You know, beating the Eagles.
Swag surfing in Carolina. Are you kidding?
You know, we got Kirktober and all that stuff. The vibes are great for heading into November. 6-3. We're just like, oh man, like they only have to go 500 and they get the 10 wins. They're going to win the division. They're going to roll through this division. The vibes were great. And then they weren't.
Until it wasn't.
And then Jack got into the comments.
Okay. Jack entered the chat. That was it.
So quickly, and then they weren't.
Yeah. And so like so when you see this stuff, you're seeing a reflection of that, I think, with how Raheem and these guys are getting graded, where it's like the vibes are good. But as we're all sitting here saying, like when the vibes are going good, later this summer, when Michael Penix is carving up, practices and whatnot, and not playing in the preseason, and we're not going to have that conversation again. But and then in the regular season, if the vibes are going great, it's like, it's great, but then you got to finish, right? It's not how you start; it's how you finish. And so this team didn't finish last year, and that's really the thing that they need to do. But it is at least good for Jack and everybody else that the vibes are looking great.
Can we talk about Jack every week? And if you haven't been listening for the past hour, just rewind.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
Appreciate you, Jack. Our P1s.
Yeah. So, like we said, Raheem Morris got an A+. Awesome. That's a vote of confidence from the players. But keep that same energy, and maybe they keep that same energy if Jack makes his way to Flowery Branch and then back to the Bends and then back up to Flowery Branch and maybe even follows them on the road in the NFC South. We'll see. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked on Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. And, of course, his frequent guest, Jarvis Davis. Check out Maria Martin, host of Sports Extra on Sundays on 11 to Live. We will see you guys next time.